Well, you spent more than a decade managing in businesses, and since then you spent a lot of time working with businesses in the operations field. So, on reflection, what is the role of operations? What does it does? What does it do in a business?
So, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's interesting, particularly because often the word operations isn't used. It was traditionally in manufacturing organisations, but as you move more into services, operations isn't used. They use other phrases like customer service or front office or back office, or So operations, in my mind, is all the activities involved in often developing a product or service. Not always, it does depend, but actually serving a customer, or making a product that then is sold to a customer. And it's all those different activities. A phrase that people often use is from initial inquiry all the way through to cash when they pay you. And different functions play different roles along that journey, but operations is very important in delivering that experience. And it's how the customer interacts, and it's what the customer often remembers. That's why it's so important in retaining them. Because often you can sell a product or a service or an idea, but the reality of then how that's delivered can be very different, and it's operations that does that. So often, as I say, it could be customer service. In services, often the word operations just means back office, but it's also front office, where you have the customer contact. And it has a really important role in an organisation. Its obvious role is the day-to-day, the actual day-to-day activity of interacting with customers and serving them, or making products. And often that's a lot of different activities that have to occur in a day. But it also has a very important strategic role. And it owns often the majority of the costs, the majority of the assets, and the majority of the people, and actually conducts the majority of the activities, which ultimately defines what the business is capable of. So it has a really significant strategic role, but that's not often recognised. Often, actually, businesses historically have just seen operations as being a bit of a headache. It's expensive, it's complicated, and actually, if we want to try and improve it, we've got to get our heads around it first, and that's going to be tricky. So, too often, organisations just simply give that problem to someone else. Rather than work it out myself, let's give it to someone else. And we've seen, particularly in the 1980s and the 80s and 90s, and the 2000s too, lots of organisations giving that problem to someone else. I think we're going to see that changing as people are starting to want to do things in their own country, and they're realising that a lot of the benefits they thought would happen haven't happened, or they've added additional risk that they didn't realise was going to happen. So the initial perception of an organisation, I think, is more that it's just a headache or it's expensive. But then it can change. Then they can start to see that actually operations can add a lot of value. So it can not only keep customers once you've got them, but it can also attract them, and it can start to change their behaviours and start to change the way they think, and open up new markets too. So it's got a very important operational role, a day-to-day role, but it has a very significant strategic role too. And all the great organisations that people hold up as being fantastic examples, the likes of Apple and the likes of Google, have incredibly good operations. That's just not shouted about. But if you go into an Apple store, you have a great experience. It's not just wonderful marketing, it's not just wonderful products. When you actually hit that store, the way you're served is fantastic. And that is what keeps you going back. That's what keeps you returning. So you know that if ever I have a problem with my phone or my computer, what have you, you're going to get looked after.